The European Union takes the UK to court as Boris Johnson prepares to stop the negotiations and leave on WTO terms. Hello everyone and welcome to today's show. We are getting very close to the Brexit trade talks deadline in June when both sides have to decide whether they want to extend the transition or not. The European Union, we have mentioned that they are becoming desperate, but they are truly becoming desperate now. And they're not doing too well. The whole unity amongst the Brussels bureaucrats. Earlier this week, they decided to threaten one of their own member states, Germany, to take them to court. Today, they are literally taking Britain to court. We're not even a member. And their demands have now been completely rejected by Boris Johnson. We've had some developments, very radical developments over the last 24 hours. But let's start with the latest news that we have. The European Union have now launched a legal action against the UK for breaching the free movement rules. Yeah. Firstly, it's like no one's told Brussels that we have left the EU, and any existing arrangement will be fading out by the end of December. Secondly, what's the worst that you're going to do to punish us? Are you going to kick us out as members again? So let's get into this thing because we have now apparently failed to comply on these open border arrangements. And it is kind of funny because the statement that we have from Brussels, the European Commission, is this. The UK national legislation limits the scope of beneficiaries of the EU free movement law in the United Kingdom, as well as the possibilities for EU citizens and their family members to appeal these decisions. The United Kingdom are becoming sovereign and they want to look after their own borders. It's very naughty. How dare you? The Commission considers that the UK has therefore breached the Free Movement Directive, as well as the EU rules on freedom of movement of EU citizens, freedom of movement of workers, and freedom of establishment. Now, they say that the EU law on free movement of persons continue to apply to and in the United Kingdom as if it were still an EU member state during the transition period. Well, that's technically true, but again, there's a difference between legality and practicality. We have literally a few months left. What's the worst that you guys are going to do? Are you going to, as I said, you can't really kick us out as members. Are you not going to give us a trade deal because your ship's going down as well? And if this is a new way for the EU to make more money and take more money out of treasury, that's not going to work. I am kind of interested to see if this is going to go to the European Court of Justice, because if that's the case, like with the German case, then that's really unfair. Obviously, we're going to lose. So they've also said that the UK's shortcomings in the implementation and transposition of the EU free movement law risks, therefore, also affecting the implementation of the citizens' rights. None of this actually happened. This hasn't happened. The citizens' rights hasn't actually changed. And this is a complete lie. Now, going back to the main issue, now this is going to be an ongoing case because they have actually taken legal action. It's not like with Germany when they just threatened Germany to do it. This is becoming quite chaotic because yesterday, for the first time, we actually have had not just Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, but the whole cabinet fully united and send a strong message to Brussels and rejected all their demands. This is great news. So we've been criticizing the Boris's government on a number of issues, but on this particular thing, actually, they're doing really well. So they have now rejected all the EU demands for the UK to make concessions. Now, when you get into this thing, they are essentially talking about how the Brexit trade talks were heading for trouble today. This is a yesterday article after Boris Johnson led the entire cabinet in flatly rejecting the EU demands for Britain to make concessions. Now, this includes access to fisheries. This includes the level playing field, which is a protectionist measure, which means we won't actually be able to be a free trade global country. We won't be able to sign free trade agreements with other countries because we have to go with EU regulation, because it has to be a level playing field with EU member states. So that's ridiculous. And we have, I've been quite scared, thinking, what if Boris's cabinet make concessions, but looks like they're not doing this. We do have an update from today, but before we get into that, let's finish the yesterday's developments, because according to the Prime Minister's office, cabinet have agreed that we won't agree to demands for us to give up our right as an independent state, especially when the EU has shown through its agreement with other countries like Canada that these controls are not necessary. The hardball tactics are designed to push the EU into dropping the negotiating demands. It might work, or it might be the case which will force Boris Johnson to prepare for WTO. David Frost, the Prime Minister's chief negotiator, has now briefed the cabinet that obviously the EU are demanding far more from Britain. We're not actually asking for anything special from our side. Now, this is exactly why, when you look at the statement that Downing Street and the PM's spokesperson has given out, they say that the cabinet have now obviously become united. The Treasury studies suggest that a deal with America would earn just a fraction of the value of an EU trade pact. But regardless of this, when we have a situation where the UK government are now negotiating with not just America, but also Canada, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, when you put them all together, we could easily bluff our way through this and force the EU to back down. It really depends. So this was yesterday, and then we come into today's issues. So what happened was, today was the final day of the third round of negotiations. And, well, essentially yesterday, but today they've announced that it's finished. Until now, it was Michel Barnier being disappointed that the UK are not really backing down. Today, it's David Frost, the UK negotiator, who's now said for the first time that the European Union are just playing ideological games. They're not going to change their minds, apparently. We're disappointed, and we have now hit a roadblock. Simple as that. And I think this is good language, because until now, David Frost has been strong, but the UK's position was always to be the underdogs, to be the, hey, we're trying our best. The EU are being difficult. At this point, the negotiating team from Britain are now sending a message saying that, okay, looks like you guys are being actually difficult now, and we are not scared of preparing for no deal if that comes. So the ideological approach that the EU has is based on their principles, which is idiotic. So in this article, thanks to Guido Fawkes, it talks about how the third round of the EU trade negotiations has just been concluded, and David Frost is now less than positive about the whole situation. He's now said that, I regret, however, that we made very little progress, especially on the most significant issues between us. He's also said that the obstacle is the European Union's insistence on all these unbalanced proposals on the so-called level playing field, which would bind this country to the European Union law and their regulations because of their legal regime. And this is not, even declared in the political declaration fully, because they said that this is going to be a flexible agreement. The whole point of negotiation was to leave this to be flexible, and not to necessarily become a non-member and just become a member without being an actual member. So in a line that reveals that UK is now frustrated, David Frost says that it is hard to understand why the EU insists on an ideological approach which makes it more difficult to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. Yeah, so the next round of the negotiations will start in just over 2 weeks, in about 16 days. And this will be the round where both sides will have to actually conclude something, because June will come, and if they want to request any extension, this is going to make the EU look ridiculous and weak, because they wanted the UK government to request an extension, but the EU can do it themselves as well. But if the EU requests an extension, then that will definitely make them look weak and feeble. That, desperate, saying, "Oh, guys, please give us an extension. We don't want you to leave without a deal." this will be a political suicide for the European Union. This is why it's probably a better strategy for Brussels to actually say, well, fine, if you don't want to back down, then leave without a deal. This is what they should do in Brussels. But it seems like they're not really as smart as they were during the withdrawal agreement negotiations. They were a lot more stronger on this than they are now. I think it's just because they are not fully united anymore. They have issues with Germany, with France. Now, in the daily vlog that I'm going to post at 8 p.m. tonight, I'm going to talk about this weird fake unity and solidarity in Europe and how certain issues are actually coming up, and the Europeans are now rising up against the European Union. So obviously make sure to tune in at 8 p.m. to watch that. But also, if you want to support the channel, don't forget to join as a member. The link is here. The link is also in the description. You could actually click on it. But if you want to just go on your browser and type in this, and you could follow me on social media, Twitter and Instagram. I have my daily rants on Twitter about not just Brexit, but everything related to freedom. I'm Tousi. I'll see you guys at 8 p.m. with our daily vlog.